Ann Swindler and Susan Cox Watkins' study, Teach a Man to Fish, the Sustainability Doctrine and Its Social Consequences, examines how sustainable development initiatives impacted various groups in Malawi society. While the authors focus on the outcomes of sustainable development, I would like to examine the genesis of sustainability logic and how media representations of third world aid recipients inform this logic and why, despite its known failures, it remains an attractive option for Western aid agencies and donors. In the waning days of the Cold War, charity advertisements presented the Third World as piteous, one-dimensional, and helpless. As Ryan Richards highlights, media representations during this time period were not governed and were selectively cherry-picked to present a monolithic image of the helpless, passive, and non-autonomous aid recipient. Advertisers and journalists ignored providing context, such as location or reasons for the poverty, and relied on emotional responses elicited by stereotypical depictions to justify their mission. Essentially, the phrase third world became synonymous with the helpless African aid recipient. Concurrently, in the United States, Ronald Reagan's creation of the welfare queen, the single black, poor mother located in American urban centers, produced a stereotypical image of who welfare recipients are. While the welfare queen differed from the third world aid recipient in that the former was depicted as consciously rigging the welfare system, the resulting reforms mirrored the logic of sustainability development as it is popular today.
More must be done to reduce poverty and dependency, and believe me, nothing is more important than welfare reform. It's now common knowledge that our welfare system has itself become a poverty trap, a creator and reinforcer of dependency. And that's why last year, in my State of the Union message, I called for an overhaul of our welfare system.
Dependency on welfare was to be avoided at all costs, a key tenet of sustainability logic. Moreover, the racial implications of this stereotyping have survived generations. As a recent study by Boss W. Van Dorn highlights, Black Americans are disproportionately represented as poor in news stories relative to their actual level of poverty. The result has been continued labeling of Black Americans as lazy and calls for work for welfare reforms, demonstrating the logic of sustainability at work. In 1989, the General Assembly of European NGOs adopted its Code of Conduct on images and messages relating to the Third World. Generally, the code sought to affirm the humanity, dignity, and agency of aid recipients. Richards found that advertisements created after the release of the code were more sensitive in their depictions of Third World aid recipients, yet problems still existed. For example, cultural representation of the subjects remained poor at just 18% of all ads. Middleton states that the legacy of these stereotypical images has led to the public perception that the poor must be, in some form or another, complicit in their own misfortunes. Clearly, Western media's depictions of aid recipients as helpless led to generational fears of third world dependency. It is exactly this fear, which would not be possible without stereotypical media portrayals, that underlies sustainability logic in the 21st century. Sustainable projects offer aid programs while alleviating fears of dependency. Swindler and Watkins note that a primary feature of sustainable development is its profoundly moral invocation to the poor, that they should become self-reliant, mobilizing their own energies and resources to solve their own problems. Training and education programs, rather than needed resources, are the result of sustainable development efforts. Swindler and Watkins' findings are one example of this. Western media created an image of a hopeless aid recipient who can only be saved by intervention, yet Western liberal values, specifically the belief in meritocracy, necessitate the use of sustainability logic in aid projects, which perpetually fail those they are intended to benefit.
This is incredible. Seeing a truck cart away 10 bodies of people who died from Ebola, I can't imagine what someone is thinking who has arrived there for treatment. It's the gates of hell, going into that treatment ward and knowing that the odds are you're going to come out in a body bag.
While images of the Third World are beginning to improve, instances such as the Ebola crisis continue to demonstrate the West's propensity to paternalize those in need of aid. It is important to keep the role of media in mind when examining the genesis of sustainable development and possible solutions for the future.